Today I want to take a look at some power chord alternatives to make your rhythm playing a little bit spicier. I'm going to show power chord alternatives in standard and drop tunings, since both happen quite often in rock and metal. Now, I already did a lesson on what I call progressive rock power chords, which are a good alternative to power chords, and I'll touch briefly on those again in this video, but there are a lot of other really useful alternatives as well. I'm using a 7-string here, but these ideas work on 6, 7, or 8-string guitars. I have my low B string dropped to A, so I have a standard tuned 6-string guitar on top, with drop tuning on the bottom. And that way I can show these chord voicings in standard and drop tunings on one guitar. A power chord is just a root and a fifth. If we take G, for example, you have the notes G and the fifth D. To make this a full major or minor chord, I'd need to add a third, either a major or minor third. So power chords can work over major or minor chords, which is why they're so useful and effective. You can add an octave up to a power chord. On this G, you'd have G, D, and then a higher G. If you want to turn that into a progressive rock power chord, you get the ninth. So you have root, fifth, and ninth. And these work for major and minor chords as well. And once again, I have a separate video just on these if you want to check that out a little bit deeper. But here's how they look in standard tuning, and then in drop tuning. Here's an example of these in action in my song, The Fourth Wall. I could also add another fifth on top of a power chord. It's a bit of a stretch in standard tuning, but it has a nice full sound. I could add the fifth to a prog rock power chord too. I'm going to do that in drop tuning, which is a little bit easier. It's one of the nice things about drop tunings is how simple it is to play power chords, so it's very easy to add other notes on top of it. Another really common power chord alternative is to invert a power chord. To invert a power chord, I'm just going to put the fifth on the bottom. So if I have a C power chord, which is C and G, I'm going to take that G and put it on the bottom. So I have G and then C. Probably add the octave up too, so G, C, and G. So that's an inverted power chord in standard tuning. These are all movable shapes, by the way. And here's how it looks in drop tuning. These are really useful for getting a lower, heavier sound on power chords where the lowest root note is higher up on the guitar. If I was on a standard tuned 6-string guitar, for example, the note E flat, the lowest one we have is pretty high up on the guitar. So playing a power chord there sounds kind of weak. So if I want to make that heavier, I could invert it and put the fifth B flat on the bottom, and you get this. And this is actually exactly what I do in my song Escape Velocity. There's a heavy breakdown at the end. I'm kind of riding on an E flat power chord, but to make it heavier, I invert it. Just like I did with the normal power chords, I could extend these inverted power chords, add another root on top, or even a ninth. Gives you an inverted prog rock power chord. That's how that looks in standard tuning. And then in drop tuning. I mentioned how power chords can be used on major and minor chords, and one thing you can do is to actually add a third to a power chord to make it a major or minor chord. So if we take a prog rock power chord, C in this case, if I slide my pinky up one fret, it becomes a minor chord. That's our minor third, E flat. If I slide it up one more fret, you get a major chord. Now these are a pain to play on standard tuned guitars, as you can tell, but in drop tuning it's not too bad. So minor, major. Be aware that if you add a third to a power chord, you're going to need to know whether that chord is major or minor. So these don't work quite as universally as normal power chords, but they have a really nice sound to them. I use a few of these chord voicings in the chorus of my tune, Unbalanced Tranquility. In drop tunings, you can add these thirds in an octave up. This is a really nice full sound, and I'll often do these chords in between chugging patterns. For that kind of a sound. One shape I really like to use is to play major or minor chords in first inversion, meaning you're putting the third in the bass. So if I have a G major chord, which is G, B, and D, I'm going to put that third B down below. So I'll have a G power chord, and put that B below. So now we have a heavier sound, and also a more harmonically rich sound. Now I can make that a minor chord by moving that first finger back one more fret. So that would be an inverted G minor chord. And these have a really nice sound to them. I can almost move them around at will. They sound really good. Here's an example of a bunch of these chords in my 60 odd meters in 60 seconds video. Another really common way to change up power chords is just to change the interval of a root and a fifth to something else. So if I take a G power chord, and take the fifth D, I'm just going to move it up and down a half step. If I move it down a half step, we get a flat 5, or a tritone, and this is really common for a heavy, dark sound. Some of these intervals are really dissonant, like your flat 2 or minor second, your major second, minor 7th, major 7th. And then some of them are more consonant, like minor 3rds, major 3rds, 4ths, 5ths, minor and major 6ths. And you can really use any of these, especially if you're just chugging on power chords. So I'd experiment with that and just see how they all sound. So there are a few alternatives to normal power chords. There are even more options than these, but this should get you started on spicing up your power chords. I think it's a good way to add variety and interest to your rhythm guitar playing. As always, if you enjoyed this lesson, subscribe, hit the bell notification, like, comment, share. Till next time, stay proggy.